Hello, good morning, and welcome to Sunday's sermon here on Politics Social. I'm Graham Hughes. Nice to have you with me. Maybe I should put my microphone in front of myself and they might be able to hear me a bit better. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday, the 15th of February 2026. We've got in the chat, we've got Martin Harrow, we've got Reverend Cathy, we've got Simon Smith, we've got Gallifreyan Wren, we've got Durhamite Blue. That's a cool name. Hello, Durhamite Blue. We've got Diz in there as well. So since Diz is in there, and only because Diz is in there, I'm going to set a target of 5 super chats of any colour, of any flavour, of any taste, whatever. Beginning with any letter of the alphabet. And if we get those 5 in, we will launch the confetti cannon. So there you go. Right. Today we're going to be talking about Europe and America. So just to explain the format of Sunday sermon, it's a little bit different from the morning shows normally. Morning shows, I tend to talk about lots of different news stories. We go through the newspapers and stuff. But the idea of the Sunday sermon is we just do one deep dive into one particular topic that's sort of overarching what's happening around the world right now. And so today we're going to be talking about this idea that the post-1945 friendship between the US and Europe, specifically Western Europe, was, wasn't really a friendship. It was strategic for both the US and Europe, and it does look like that whole project, that whole thesis, has been just blown out the water by recent events. But I want to get into the actual history of it and talk a bit of like how we got here and how, in some ways, this was like this wasn't how we were expecting it to go. We really weren't. And you've heard of people who make trouble in an empty house. I really do feel like the Trump administration are people who are just bored, feckless, nepo baby gobshites who are bored in life. You know, like this J.K. Rowling's woman who says, I think she's a woman, who says, "Oh, I hate trans people." She just goes on about it all the time. I'm like, what is that what you would do if you had £1 million in the bank? No, that's a billion. Fuck it, $1 billion. If you had £1 billion in the bank, right? Wouldn't you be just, I don't know, helping your mates out, paying off the mortgages, starting up community centres, building a pub somewhere in that, in a little community that needs a pub, a really nice one that's really friendly and child friendly and just a lovely place to. Wouldn't you just do stuff like that? Wouldn't you make I don't know. I always think like I just party. I just have a party every night. I'd go invite people to the beach party and we'll dance in the sand and have a fire and the barbecue. It'd be great. You could do that every night for the rest of your life, but instead they're there, 3 o'clock in the morning on Twitter going, "I hate trans people," and you're like, what the hell? And it's because they're bored. It's because they've got all this money and they want a medal or something. And so boredom has led to some of the biggest disasters that have ever happened in history. Have happened because people are bored and gone, "Oh, I wonder what this does," and then press the button that says "Do not press." It's a weird human thing that we do. What we need, I think, is like a play centre for these billionaires to live in. Like with activities for them to do, like colouring in books and stuff, just to keep them out of mischief. Because a bored billionaire is quite possibly the most dangerous thing on this planet. A bored billionaire is more dangerous to the planet and the future of humanity than nuclear weapons. I swear. And in fact, if you think about the damage that nuclear weapons have done, well, only 2 of them have been dropped in anger. Compared with all the damage the billionaires have done and the lasting damage that the billionaires are going to be doing for years and years, thousands of years to come when it comes to the climate. This is a huge problem. Hoping for closer unity with Europe. Thank you very much to Anonymous. Yeah, I am as well. For the UK and Europe. I mean, that to me is a no-brainer. Like, that is an instant win. That's a headshot for Labour. Do you know what I mean? Playing the FPG. But yeah, let's get into this. So after World War II, there was a strategic bargain that was struck up from Western Europe. Don't forget, Eastern Europe was behind the Iron Curtain. At the time, there were countries like Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, which were part of the USSR. They were Soviet republics within the USSR. Then you had countries like Bulgaria and Moldova was actually part of the USSR. So you got Bulgaria and Romania. You've also got Poland, what was then Czechoslovakia, which were behind the Iron Curtain, and also half of Germany. And then you had this weird situation where you had half of Berlin was Western, so you could fly into Berlin. You couldn't drive because it would have been going through Eastern Germany, which was, under. They pretended to be hands off, but basically, if you displeased Moscow in any way, and you happen to live in, I don't know, Dresden or something, they would kill you. They would fucking kill you, and probably kill your family as well. You know, it was a miserable time to be alive. But unfortunately, the survivors of that era have got like survivor's bias, you know, where like you think, oh well, I survived, so it couldn't have been that bad. A lot of people got through the COVID pandemic and go, I survived, it couldn't have been that bad. Maybe it was all just made up. I'm like, no, it was really bad. It's just that you survived. Millions didn't. Okay, just saying. But yeah, so Western Europe and the US. We had this strategic bargain. It was built on shared enemies, shared markets, and shared rules. Mainly, you know, Europe got security guarantees, money, and access to US market. The US got a forward base for its military operations, but also it got loyal allies. It got legitimacy for global leadership, a stable, rich partner bloc that will buy their stuff and respect their copyright. This is really important because so much of modern America has been built on IP. When you think about not just like movies, but also pharmaceutical companies making new products, and then they have a certain amount of time before it becomes generic, depending on what the drug is. Europe said, yeah, we're going to respect American copyright and intellectual property. We'll respect that. Vietnam didn't. You know, Costa Rica didn't. So China certainly bloody didn't. Iran didn't. Syria didn't. You know, you can get a kind of, what do they have in Syria? Is it Roller Cola? It looks like Coca-Cola, but it says Roller Cola. And then in China, you've got a McDonald's, but it's called McWrongs. And it's instead of the M being like this, it's a W. Honestly, I've had a burger from McWrongs. It was all right, actually. It was all right for McWrongs. But, you know, they know that American companies can't sue them for copyright infringement. So think about all the movies, think about all the music, think about all the patents that have been registered in America and they've been respected by the countries in Europe, and therefore America's made a shitload of money out of it. But you see, what's changed in recent years is this bargain it relied on an assumption that America is predictable, broadly pro-alliance, and treats allies as partners, not as property. You know? Not like they have dominion over us, not like they can tell us what to do. They can come to an agreement, but that's very different in a relationship. You can have a relationship that you have shared goals, and you get on, and you decide things together, or you can have a relationship where someone is a fucking toxic piece of shit, who tells you what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to wear, which friends you're allowed to hang out with, all that kind of stuff. Like, if you're in a relationship with anyone and they start telling you, oh, you can't hang out with them because I don't like them, you've got to walk away. At that point in your life, you've just got to look at it and go, I can't do this. I think that is, and I'm sorry that's a bit traumatic for me to say that, by the way, because I've been in difficult relationships in the past, and it can be a bit triggering. Do you know what I mean? Like when people are like, Well, then what effectively America's done that. It has said to Europe, it started throwing its weight around, saying, oh, you've got to spend more on defense, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to stop all the wokeness. No, fuck off. That you can't just... We didn't elect Donald Trump. We didn't elect those knobheads that surround him. No one elected them, actually. Marco Rubio and all that lot. You could argue J.D. Vance was on the ticket, but the others weren't. You know, Pam Bondi. fucking Caroline Levitt. They weren't on the fucking ticket. Oh, they're just mates of the president. What a silly system. At least in the UK, to be in the cabinet, you have to be elected usually, although in certain circumstances we can bring people over from the House of Lords, but effectively you have to be a legislator in order to be part of the cabinet. In Trump's cabinet, you could just pick a tramp up off the street and say, "Hey, Mr. Vagrant, I'm going to take you away from your alcohol and your, I don't know, shadow boxing, literally boxing with your own shadow outside the co-op, outside the spa, and I'll clean you up. It'll be like that. What's that Beverly Hills film? Was it Down and Out in Beverly Hills? Was that the one where they took in the homeless guy, and he ended up having sex with everybody and taking over the family? Down and Out in Beverly Hills. Is that what it was called? I can't remember. I think it was the it's basically what they did with Saltburn, isn't it? Saltburn is just a remake of Down and Out in Beverly Hills. There you go. That's my hot take on that one. But yeah, Trump and Trumpism breaks this assumption that we can rely on America. It's not just Trump the man, but the politics that have made him the president twice. That's the real problem. That's a fundamental problem. That is an underlying problem. And so when we have these Americans coming to the Munich Security Conference yesterday, like AOC came and Gavin Newsom was there, and then they're like, "Oh, Trump, he's going to be out in 3 years, and then everything's going to go back to normal." Okay. He might be out in 3 years, but I still think the lesson here is permanent, And it's not that Europeans are necessarily anti-American. We're not, we're not raging down the streets with placards saying, piss off Uncle Sam. But we do have to do a bit of risk management here with a partner that has become volatile, transactional, and hostile, saying he's got to invade our land. And don't forget, Greenland is technically part of Europe. It's part of Denmark. It's part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And the rational response here is strategic autonomy. Europe acting like a power, coming together. And in some ways, honestly, I think this might be a good thing in the long run, because Europe's been held back for too long by the fact that, there's some kind of shame thing going on with Europe. Not just in the EU, but in the UK as well. And I think about this. I think about the way that we make fuck all of our IP. Think about the biggest Hollywood franchises that weren't comic books, right? Not based on DC or Marvel, but the biggest franchises of all time. What were they? Lord of the Rings, James Bond, Harry Potter. I think you'll find they were all British books. They were books from Britain. They were British IP. Why didn't we make those fucking movies? I don't know. Obviously, Star Wars, American. You can have that. You can have Star Wars. You have the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's fine. You do you. That is fine. But then you think about some of the films that built studios. If you think about Universal in the 1930s, they made these really low rent, high yield horror movies. And what were they? Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, both based on Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. They had the Dracula, the son of Dracula, Dracula's wife, whatever. Moving on, based on Dracula by Bram Stoker, Irish, British, and so. You can look at all these, H.G. Wells, The Time Machine, or even if you want to go over to France, you could take all the ideas that were nicked off Jules Verne for movies. One of the biggest productions of all time in history is David Niven's Around the World in 80 Days from 1955. I think that movie's got over 1 million extras in it. They built a ridiculous number of sets for these scenes that will only last a minute, and then they'll be off somewhere else. And that was based on European IP. Then think about Disney, right? Disney made all of its money through adapting European folktales. And I know now it's moved on to Polynesian folktales with Moana. But generally speaking, you think of its biggest ever hit, Frozen, it's based on The Ice Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, who was Danish. The Little Mermaid, based on the book by Hans Christian Andersen. Also, the Grimm fairy tales, from which it got a bunch of IP. The Grimm brothers were German. And I look at this and I think they've made so much bloody money out of it. Imagine if we started making Superman movies. You know, no. I know they always get a Brit to play Superman, which is funny to me. But you know, hello, I'm Superman. I'm the all-American hero. Are you from America? No, I'm from Cardiff. Okay. Or when they get Batman, they get Christian Bale in to play Batman. Hey, I'm Batman. Are you all American from Gotham City? It's analog of New York. Where are you from? I'm from Glasgow. Okay, cool. Then you know. So yeah, I look at this and I think we could be doing so much better if we stop being so reasonable with America, because at the moment they're not being reasonable with us, and this is why I think some good might come of this. I genuinely do. I'm not trying to, you know, oh well, you know, every cloud's got a silver lining, because things that, you know, the lesson from Trump is permanent. You know, it is. The US could flip again to the fash dickheads. You know, trust doesn't just respawn overnight. It needs to be built up through years and years. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the before the special relationship, Europe's old world and America's distance. Now, pre-1914, Europe was the center of the world. America was doing its own thing. It didn't get involved in other people's conflicts. There was this thing. It was the Monroe Doctrine, which has now been adopted by Donald Trump, which was essentially America has dominion over everything in the Americas, which it shouldn't ever, but everything else it doesn't really care about. And yeah, European empires at the time, before 1914, they dominated global trade, territory, finance, and naval power. Europe is a constant engine of conflict with shifting borders and war. War is normal. You know, if you look at the timeline of wars in Europe, you have this like war, and then at the end of 1945, and you know things started, you know, calming down a bit. And then you look at the EU in particular, and the countries that are part of the EU, they just stop fighting each other. It's a remarkable turn of events. But not in 1914. In 1914, everyone was gearing up for the war that was going to start in 1914. Europe was a tinderbox. This was also exacerbated by the scramble for Africa. And don't forget, when that meeting took place in Berlin in 1885, and they decided to carve up Africa amongst the European powers. So France got Mali, Burkina Faso. It got what was then Niger. Well, the whole of that area. They got Morocco. They got Algeria. Meanwhile, the Italians got Libya. They got what would become Eritrea. The British, bloody hell, they had protectorates in Egypt, in Sudan. They also they were in charge in Zanzibar, in what was then, you know, Kenya, and all the way down. What's now Namibia was British. South Africa, obviously, the Nigeria, an insanely big country. Nigeria, British. Half of Cameroon was British. It was shared with the French. Then you had Ghana as well on what was then, you know, what was in the past the slave coast. It isn't anymore, but Ghana was called the Gold Coast at the time. And then you had the Dutch, who had obviously gone into South Africa many years earlier. So you had the Boers, which were the Dutch farmers who had been living there for well over 100 years, but at that point. And you had the fucking Belgians. I'm not saying that we were better in, you know, overall, but you know what the Belgians did in Democratic Republic of Congo was fucking mind-blowing. They killed half the population. King Leopold II ran it as his own private fiefdom. It was horrific. It was just as immoral as it gets. Portugal was there as well. They took Cape Verde, and they took what's now Guinea-Bissau. They took Mozambique and Angola, and yeah, Spain really. Equatorial Guinea, I think, and the Spanish Sahara was theirs. And America just didn't really get involved. They had one little bit of land next door to Sierra Leone, which was bought by the British 100 years earlier. Well, not quite 100 years earlier, about 80 years earlier, as a place to put recaptured slaves. So when, actually, it was originally purchased, for those in the know, for the slaves that fought on the side of the British during the American War of Independence, because they were promised their freedom by the British, and the British, even though apparently George Washington stormed out of the meeting, he was really pissed off about this, because obviously the Americans were like, well, we're independent now. And he's like, yeah, okay. But we're going to take the slaves that we said that we were going to free for fighting on our side. And George Washington goes, no, you're not. You're not taking our slaves. Nice guy. They all got shipped off to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then a lot of those freed slaves came to live in London and had a fucking terrible time. And it was William Wilberforce and his mates who set up what's now become Sierra Leone, right? So Sierra Leone was a place where if you had been taken over to the Americas for whatever reason, usually slavery, and you needed somewhere to go back in Africa, you couldn't go back to your home because you'd been sold, you could go and live in the Providence of Freedom, which is now Freetown in Sierra Leone. Listen, this wasn't all altruistic by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, it was a means to an end. But what happened next door is the country of Liberia was set up as a place where Black Americans could go back home if they so wished. So Liberia was really the only American colony in Africa. And this is important because in 1914, when it all fucking kicked off, and don't forget, Germany had Togoland. It had, Namibia. Namibia wasn't British. It was German, wasn't it, until after the war. They had Tanganyika and a bunch of other places, which at the end of World War I, after the Treaty of Versailles and everything, they were split between the British and the French. Took those territories. But the point is that the Americans weren't really that interested in it. They weren't interested in what was happening in the rest of the world. They weren't interested in the scramble for Africa. As far as they were concerned, they had all the resources they wanted, all the resources they needed. Don't forget, in the 1880s, Belgium was still a fairly new state. It had only been around for not even 50 years at this point. And the King of Belgium, that was a new position. Like, there hadn't been one before. Belgium was part of the Netherlands. It had been part of France. It had been part of Germany. You know, it had never been its own country in its own right until the 1800s, the early 1800s. And so you could see how America didn't need the same stuff, because there are no rubber trees in Belgium. You know, there's no gold. There's no, diamonds. There's no precious materials. And they were like, oh, a small country, let's go out to Africa and steal all this shit from other people. But America had that stuff. America had the fucking gold. You know, famously, they had the gold rush in 1849, whatever it was. You know, that they had all the resources they need. They had this vast country that was just still, at that point, I mean, some of the parts were still unexplored, you know. And so America just didn't need the rest of the world. It just didn't. So, okay, cool. You know, Europe is doing its own thing, America, fighting amongst itself, and the US is emerging as this world power at this point in 1914. But it wasn't like Europe's manager. You know, it was growing economically and militarily, but it was keeping a psychological distance from European power politics, and they saw the Atlantic as a moat between them and the old world chaos of Europe, which is funny now because I see the Atlantic as a moat between us and the chaos that's going on in America right now. But this is why they were late coming into World War I. They really didn't want any part of it. They couldn't be arsed, you know. You know, you got to understand that the post 1945, after the Second World War, that world was abnormal. The world that we grew up in was the weird one. It wasn't reverting to the norm. This is reverting to the norm of just countries looking out for themselves, especially the US, and trying to muscle other countries into doing what they do. But World War I, this is America's first big intervention. It entered late. It helped end the slaughter, and its participation was decisive, but very short. It didn't come until the very end of the war. At that point, the German and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, what was left of it in Germany, were fighting on two fronts. You had the Western Front and the Eastern Front as well, fighting against Russia up till 1917, until the revolution stopped all that. But yeah, on the Western Front, and it just became a war of attrition. And in the end, Germany just couldn't get the supplies it needed to keep the war going. Whereas the Allies, with the US, could, or the Triple Entente, or whatever it's called. It wasn't the Allies back then, was it? But after the war, after World War One, the US didn't commit to any kind of long-term European security. As Europe tried to build a new world order, the US pulled back into domestic priorities, and this is really important. So at the end of World War One, you had the famous Treaty of Versailles, signed at Versailles Palace outside Paris in France, and that treaty was never ratified by the American Congress. It was never ratified by America. And this set things up for what would eventually become World War II, because the punishment meted out to Germany, not just losing its African possessions, but also losing Nauru, losing the top half of what's now Papua New Guinea and other places. They lost their entire empire, and they had these reparations that they were told to pay, and it was just bankrupting the country, and that led the way to the failure of the Weimar Republic, because they were fighting with one arm behind their back. I talk about this sometimes, and it pisses me off when countries demand payment from another country because they're given a loan to the people who were in power before, and then loads of people die, and they get, for one reason or another, and they get rid of the twat in charge, but they're still saddled with the debt. This happens all over African countries. Remember the Drop the Debt campaign? This was all part of it. You had these mad bloody dictators in the 70s and 80s in South America, in Asia, in Africa, who would rack up this huge amount of debts and borrowing money off the IMF and from private loans all over the world. And then they were like, get deposed, or they piss off to go and live out the rest of their days in a palace in Saudi Arabia, like Idi Amin. But the people, the fledgling democracy is then saddled with all the debt. It's like moving in to a new home, and then you find out 6 months down the line that you're on the hook for the gambling debts of the person who used to live in the house. And you're like, I didn't gamble that money. I didn't ask for that money. You shouldn't have given the money. The guy was obviously a lunatic. Why did you give him the money? I thought I had stopped my alarm going off, but I obviously didn't. Ms. Paula Thomas, thank you very much for the £10 super chat. The Dutch also introduced Pyrrha, the disease that is thought to have sent George III mad, to South Africa via a group of orphan girls who were planted there to be potential brides. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole show about the crimes of Europe in Africa, and we'll be here all bloody day, to be honest with you. It's really, really grim. So yeah, and the result of the US pulling out, they got involved at the very end of World War One, and then they pulled out and didn't want anything more to do with it. The result was instability, resentment, unresolved conflict, and Europe remaining broken and giving a lot of oxygen to extremism. So, but that left a bad taste in the mouths of many. And then we had the birth of the sort of the modern deal after World War One. But in World War One, in 1941, America still hadn't entered the war. By the beginning of December 1941, America was not part of the war, but it was supporting the Allied powers. There was the transatlantic convoys bringing food and munitions over from the US and Canada over to the UK to help in the war effort, which we needed because Britain has not been able to create enough food to feed itself since the 1840s, I think. It's been a long time. It's been a very, very long time that we have not made enough food for the people, for the number of people who live on this island. We don't have enough food. We have to import it, some of it. Anyway, so and then you've got the sort of post-war reality of the fact that after World War II, Europe is exhausted, impoverished, vulnerable, and the Soviet Union becomes this looming strategic threat, even though, we worked with the Soviets, we fought with the Soviets to fight to beat Nazi Germany. But America wasn't interested in getting involved in World War II militarily until the attack on Pearl Harbor. And this was a weird time. Like, they have polls that were conducted just a few months before Pearl Harbor happened in December of 1941. And it was something like 93% of Americans polled said that America shouldn't get involved in the war in Europe. And then literally the month after Pearl Harbor happened, that switched. So instead of it being 93% against, it was 93% for. They were like, yes, we need to stop Germany. We need to stop Hitler, as well as Japan. So the US decided in 1945 there wouldn't be a repeat of the post-World War I retreat, okay? So they brought in the Marshall Plan. This is about rebuilding, stabilization. It was an anti-communist strategy wrapped in recovery, but it did leave European nations in quite a vulnerable position, like relying on American money coming in. But then we also had the security architecture that, from the 1940s, NATO, well, the UN becomes a thing, replacing the League of Nations. You've also got the NATO, emerging the UN's headquarters in New York, and NATO is all these European countries plus the US and Canada. And the US at that point becomes the backbone of Western European defense. And it made sense for them because they would say, right, you've got to defend yourselves. And so you can buy all these weapons off us. So that helped the military industrial complex. But also it meant they could put bases everywhere. The Yanks had bases in Britain. They still do. They have bases all over Germany. They have bases in, all these countries across Europe. They had bases. And that was the deal. And we had the security architecture which was made so that we could not just defend ourselves but defend each other. But it ended up becoming the point where we couldn't defend ourselves individually. We needed NATO. We relied on the NATO umbrella, perhaps a bit too much. The French didn't, by the way. The French pulled out of the military side of NATO in the 70s, I think. It was quite early on. I think it was before I was born. And they didn't rejoin it till 2009, They were making their own stuff. And what I mean by that is like integration of systems and weaponry. And so that particular ammo fits in that particular weapon or whatever it is. They weren't interested. They were doing their own thing. And you could argue that was a smart move because now we're in a situation where if we want to fire off our nuclear weapons, we basically have to ask America if it's okay to do so. America is the one the Americans service our nuclear weapons, and that makes it a bit more difficult, doesn't it? Whereas the French, they were like, no thanks, we'll have our own completely autonomous nuclear arsenal. So yeah, the contract was quite simply the US saying, we'll keep you safe if you stay aligned with us, and Europe was like, okay, we'll rebuild and stay in your camp. The alliance was built on a mix of generosity but self-interest a bit more, and obviously the fear of Moscow. And this isn't a Hollywood romance here. This is an insurance policy. It's a mutually beneficial contract. Like, we both did well out of it. And then we had the sort of the Cold War golden age where we had this existential threat to our Western values, as we called them, which was the Soviet Union, where life was shit. Like, life's been shit in Moscow for hundreds and hundreds of years. I don't remember a time in history when it wasn't a bit shit to be a citizen in Moscow. Maybe when Peter the Great went on his grand adventure around Europe in the early 1700s, was it? And twatted around Europe for 2 years. Maybe then they had a good time at that point. But then he got back, found out that they tried to have some kind of coup d'etat in his absence, and he killed everyone. So yeah, but then we had this sort of this Europe split, and it wasn't just a geographical split. It was kind of like a split personality. You got Western Europe with welfare states, social democracy and integration, immigration, and then Eastern Europe with Soviet domination, repression, and no immigration. And this is important. This is really important because if you think about the people who vote more likely for the AfD, for instance, in Germany, look at the map. It is Western, the old West Germany. They vote overwhelmingly for not the AfD, and Eastern vote overwhelmingly for the AfD because the older people growing up, they never saw any black people. I mean, they probably didn't see any black people on TV because the only TV they were allowed to watch was state-sanctioned television. And suddenly, there's people from Africa, there's people from Turkey living next door to their little, where they live in Eastern Germany. And suddenly, oh my God, what are we going to do? There's these people. And it makes people feel scared because they didn't grow up with it. They don't know what to do. It's the same here in the UK when you get people who grew up in all white villages and then they go to a city and they see a gang of black young men and they're like, oh my God, they're going to kill me. And probably just got to get on with their life, But yeah, the same sort of idea. And this is crucial for understanding why the AfD and right-wing parties, PiS in Poland and Orban's gang of gobshites in Hungary, why they're doing quite well at the moment, because they're not used to the kind of immigration that other countries in Europe have had for generations now. Not to say that the countries that have had the immigration for generations are cool with it. I mean, bloody France and Italy, and even here in the UK, I mean, there's still a lot of people who are saying really shitty things, like that Sarah Puchin woman who said, I don't like seeing all the black faces on the road, walking down the street. Oh, I'm scared of all the black people. Was that her? Was that? No, she didn't like to see them on the TV. That's right. She said, oh, there's too many black people on TV. It was generic. It was the other fucking clown from Refuck who said, oh, I don't like these black people. I walked down the street and I saw a bunch of black people and I got very upset. And so you can understand. I had a friend from Eastern. He grew up in East Germany, and he remembers obviously before the wall came down and everything. And he said, look, a lot of the older people, they are scared by the amount of information, the amount we know about the world now, and they find the choice paralysis kind of thing, and a lot of them they want to regress to the time when under the Soviets, under the Soviet kosh, they knew they were going to get a job. They were told to get up a certain time in the morning and go to bed at a certain time at night. And these are the people you can talk to. These are the people you can't talk to. These are the people you can marry. These are the people you can't. Like, it was very totalitarian, as in, like, a total, absolute domination of people's private lives. But it gave people order. It gave people structure. And as people get older and get more concerned about the way the world's going and the complexity of the world, and it's so big, and there's so many people, and look up at the sky, and so many stars, Jesus Christ, it makes people kind of shut down. It makes them panic, and it makes them vote for gobshites. It makes them make very, very bad decisions. But yeah, from 1949 to 1991, pretty much, that was sort of the golden age of the Cold War. The combining of Western European values and American values, and NATO was used as a machine of deterrence. US troops and the nuclear umbrella created a credible deterrence for Russia trying to expand into Western Europe, and Europe integrated economically and politically, partly under US protection. We had a common enemy, and the US were going to help us with that. And so, yeah, we had these sort of recurring themes throughout this period, though, of like Europe occasionally resenting US dominance, and the US occasionally resenting Europe, saying, oh, they're getting a free ride. We're paying for their security. We're paying for. But the thing is that that's a daft mentality, right? As far as I'm concerned, because you allow anywhere to fall into rack and ruin, and a war fucking starts. A war never, ever is contained within the borders of the country that it's in. It never is. And it might be something as small as the price of bananas go up if banana stocks are under threat from a particular battle that's going on in Central America or something. But more likely, it's going to be oil prices, and we saw this when the Russians invaded um, Ukraine, and the price of petrol went up, the price of gas, our heating our homes just went through the fucking roof. We had no control over it. But then we had the Suez Crisis in the mid-50s, and that was when Europe learned that it's not truly sovereign when the US says no, because the French and the British had this deal. They owned the Suez Canal. It was a good money-making venture as far as the British and the French were concerned. They paid for it. They built it with, obviously, Egyptian labor. But when Nasser, the then president of Egypt, nationalized the canal and says we're going to take all the money that we get out of this and give it to the state, give it to the Egyptians, which is fair enough. But at the time, the French and the British were like, "What the fuck? You can't do that." And they got in touch with Eisenhower in America, who was the president over there at the time. Said, "Can you give us a hand?" And he went, "No." He just went, "No. That's it. No. You're on your own. In fact, get out." And he told him to get out. He said, "Oh, you could get out there," and we had to do it. And it was a bit of a humiliating position there. When you talk about the end of the empire, and we still talk about some rock that Britain owns in the middle of the Atlantic, and say, "Well, that's the last houseboat of the empire." Really, I think that the Suez Crisis was the killing blow for any idea that Britain still had that kind of dominance that it had enjoyed for a couple 100 years up to that point. It done all right, but that was the point where it was obvious that this was going to be an American, well, the 20th century was going to be an American century, and whatever they want was going to go. And, the structure still held together even after the Suez Crisis. Although I think that's the point where France started going, we can't always rely on these Americans. Although Britain just didn't seem to think that way, or maybe they did, but they didn't have the money to do anything about it. I don't know. But because they had this outside threat, they had this existential threat, the USSR, Moscow, the idea that we might get taken over by God knows who, Khrushchev or Brezhnev or fucking Stalin again. The reanimated corpse of Stalin might come back and tell us what to do. But the shared enemies of NATO, if you want to call it that, US, America, US, Europe, that kept the arguments within the marriage, shall we say. And the alliance worked best when it had a single organizing principle, which was stop Russia. When that faded, the cracks started to show. And then we had 1991, the end of history, when we thought that, things aren't going to happen now. We're all just going to get along, and capitalism won the Cold War, yay, and we're just going to buy things and chill out. And that ran until September the 11th, 2001. But, the 90s, there was Europe's dream was like the peace dividend, defense spending falls so we could spend more on fun stuff like sport and leisure and a nice beach that's clean, not covered in shit. Security felt like it had been solved, to be honest with you. I mean, at that point, terrorism, we had the IRA and the Ulster Unionists doing horrible things in Ireland and across the island of Britain as well. But that was petering out, leading up to the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. Also, we had the end of apartheid in South Africa. It seemed like the world was going in the right direction. And even though the balkanization of the Balkans, who would have thought that the Balkan states would have balkanized? Well, they did, and Yugoslavia is now seven different countries. That's quite impressive. I mean, Yugoslavia wasn't that big, but it's become 7 kingdoms now, just like in Game of Thrones. That war, NATO got involved. The UN didn't. That NATO was the ones who went into Sarajevo and to Mostar, and also famously in Kosovo a couple of years later, when it was obvious that Serbia, which ran Kosovo at the time, it was part of Serbia and Montenegro. They started slaughtering ethnic Albanians. What are all these Albanians doing in Kosovo, I hear you ask? Well, Kosovo used to be part of Albania. That's why they were there. So these are people who aren't like refugees. They're not immigrants. That people who've always been there, and they were being massacred. And they sent in what they call the K4 troops, the NATO troops. into Kosovo to stop the Serbian government under Slobodan Milosevic sending in troops and then murdering innocent civilians. But like I say, there were a lot to. Everything seemed to be going in a direction of more and more peace, and even in Africa, which at the turn of the millennium, Africa was in a fucking state. Honestly, there were wars going on in Liberia and Sierra Leone and Cote d'Ivoire. There was skirmishes going on in Nigeria. There was a civil war that had been raging for decades in Angola, in Mozambique. There was a lot of bad shit going on. There was the after the Rwanda genocide that had spilled out, because nothing ever stays in one country. The Rwandan genocide, which led directly to the toppling of the Sisi government, Sisi. I forgot his name now, in Kinshasa, in what was Zaire, but then became the Democratic Republic of Congo. And then there was the Second Congolese War, in which over 6 million people died at the turn of the millennium. But even all that was petering out. It was just, there just didn't seem to be any more use in doing these battles, in these skirmishes. Because what happened in the past, in places like Angola, you would have a lot of the time you'd have the two sides, and the Allied powers would pick one side to like arm and give them the money and the weapons and stuff, and the Soviet Union would pick the other side, and they'll fight. It's like a little proxy war. I mean, you can reframe like the war in Korea, in Vietnam, as a proxy war between basically Moscow and Washington. That happened all over. That happened all over Africa. But it did seem like we were moving towards a more peaceful planet eventually, once all these wars sort of petered out. You looked at what was happening at the time with in the mid-90s at least, we had the accords between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin signing, the document saying they're going to stop fucking killing each other, and there was a lot of hope. There was a lot of hope in the air. Unfortunately, that hope was dashed by a very tall, rich nepo baby fuck job called Osama bin Laden, who decided to send out 15 Saudi citizens into fly planes into American buildings. And at that point, America lost its fucking mind, and we got dragged into another fucking century of conflict and misery. First with the invasion of Afghanistan, which was cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, didn't achieve shit, except it destabilized the region. And then the invasion of Iraq, which cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and didn't achieve shit. Helped stabilize the region now. Yay! Leading to ISIS. And ISIS got their fangs into across the Middle East, but they're all the way into northern Africa. You had countries like Mali where they had these beautiful mud brick palaces and temples and forts that were destroyed by ISIS. All the way from Palmyra in Syria, all the way over to basically the border with Senegal. I mean, they vast swathes of the world were disrupted, and people died, and the horrific crimes went on. And in some ways, I'm not saying that America deserved 9/11 to happen. It absolutely didn't. 3,000 innocent people died, which is completely fucking out of order. But it changed. It changed the mentality a bit. After thinking for a while that what is NATO without the USSR? The bargain that was like, Europe was assuming that the US protection was going to be permanent, but also the US starting to assume that Europe is permanently subordinate. And this era created, the 90s created complacency in Europe, and this idea of entitlement in the US to tell us what to do. But after 9/11, obviously that's where it all changed. And if you want to look at what's the point of NATO now? 9/11 said this is the point of NATO, and for the first time in its history, so all the way through the fucking Cold War Article 5 was never enacted. Article 5 is the bit, it's a Musketeers clause, isn't it? One for all, all for one. If one of us is attacked, we're all attacked, right? And America activated that in the wake of 9/11. And all of the NATO allies, including Denmark, they showed up. They showed up. But Afghanistan, yeah, okay, we can just about squint and say, oh, okay, they may have had something to do with it because the Taliban aren't very nice and they had the training camps there, so beats invading Saudi Arabia. But Iraq was a bit too far, and that was, I think, the beginning of the culmination of what we're seeing now, because with Iraq, the Americans went, "Who's with us?" And Tony Blair, the poodle, goes, "Yeah, hanging out of George Bush's arse. But in France, in Germany, they're like, "Fuck this shit." here's something we don't need to do. This is the public opinion in Europe at the point of the Iraq invasion became openly skeptical of the US judgment and motives. A lot of people at the time, and I don't think they were wrong, were like, America's just there for the oil. They're just there for the oil. And America's like, no, we want to give them democracy. At least Trump, he's honest when he goes to, give him that. When he invades a country and steals its fucking leader, he goes, yeah, we're there for the oil. All the oil. But, the Europe learned at that point that the US might, try and drag Europe into these disasters. But the US learned that Europe doesn't always necessarily follow America on their daft military adventures. Don't forget, French fries became freedom fries for some reason. Right, listen, I'm going to read the comments in a moment because I know I've been yabbering on for a very, very long time. But before I do, I need to blow my nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the title sequence so you don't have to see that. And then I'll be back in a moment. So, just give me 10 seconds. Here we go. Okay, that's better. I blew that a bit hard, though. I hope I didn't give myself a nosebleed. You tell it's live, can't you? When these news presenters on the radio or on TV, when they need to blow their nose, it's fine. They've always got ad breaks, so they can cut to someone else, can't they? We're going over now to our correspondent in Baghdad. And the first question they ask is always the same, isn't it? What's the atmosphere like there? Well, lots of people died, so everyone's a bit sad and a bit scared. Oh, okay. Anyway, but yeah, just go back to Iraq for a moment. I think that Iraq was the moment where the cracks started to appear in NATO, i.e., there were countries in NATO who actively stood up and said no to America, and America saw its arse about it. But France, Germany, they were like, well, Iraq didn't attack you. They didn't attack you, so I don't see how you're dragging us into this. And Europe looked at the US power at the time under George W. Bush and said, this isn't leadership. This isn't leadership. This is just pure recklessness. And it was. But then you've also got, moving on, you've got the financial crisis, which was America that triggered all that shit, and we all fucking felt it. The 2008 crash, it changed politics. The economic shock fueled nationalism, distrust, conspiracy theories, anti-elite movements, the austerity battles in the UK and the EU, north-south tensions rose, the truth in institutions eroded. There was a lot of bad shit that went on, and we're still living under the shadow of that fucking credit crunch, the financial crisis. And in America, this sort of the internal polarization deepens. You had the Tea Party in America, which would then eventually become MAGA, and then you had the Occupy Wall Street lot, who were like the diametric opposite of that. And Europe was watching the US becoming more culturally and institutionally unstable. Hey, by the way, this is a key tenet of the what you want to see. as laid out by Alexander Dugin in his 1997 book, The Foundations of Geopolitics. But Trump isn't an accident. Okay, he's not an aberration. He's a symptom of a long-running US political fracture. They're a fractured society, but also our alliance with America has been actually not that great for a while now. It's not like Trump has just sort of made all this happen. But then in 2014, Crimea was invaded by little green men who turned out to be Russians, who knew, and a big chunk of the Donbass region in the east of Ukraine was also taken. And Europe realized at this point that, geography fucking doesn't end, the battles over bits of land and where the boundaries are drawn. And there were sanctions, there was talk of deterrence, but there was still a lot of complacency. And then we got Trump, we got Brexit, which was, destabilizing for Europe. But then we also had Trump as well in 2016. And his anti-NATO rhetoric, his transactional demands, his warm signals towards illiberal leaders. This, in his first term, it was seen as like a warning shot, Trump 1.0. But Europe did treat that as an aberration and just thought we could ride this out. It'll be fine, we'll just ride it out. But then Biden got in, and Biden was fucking useless. Honestly, as the days go by, I get more and more fucking angry at Joe Biden for winning the presidency and the House and the Senate in 2020, right? And then just not doing anything with it. Not doing fucking anything with it. Not going after Trump, not restoring the fucking the damage, not fixing the damage that Trump had done. He kept a lot of the tariffs that Trump brought in his first term. They were kept on by Biden. He kept a lot of the anti-migrant rhetoric and the anti-migrants, getting rid of the illegal people who shouldn't be here illegally and the cause crimes and everything. But at the time, at the first Trump administration, Europe kept telling itself this was only temporary, but then America went and proved that it's not. And this is where we are. George only, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. Have you watched Jimmy the Giant's latest, How Britain Accidentally Colonised Itself? I wasn't expecting everyone to fully agree. with it, but 100% from me. I've not watched it yet, but I'll have to check it out. Should we get Jimmy on here? We should get Jimmy on here. I think it'd be fun to get like some of these, I really like the idea of having Zach Polanski and Phil just have it out. I think that'd be really fun. But I might wait till after this by-election because I'm sure Zach's busy at the moment. But yeah, get Jimmy on the channel. That'd be good. Anyway, so then we had obviously the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and this was a full-scale invasion into Europe. That's what it was. Like that we'd never seen in my lifetime, I don't think. In fact, when was the last invasion into Europe? I mean, you're going back a long fucking way. You're talking about the fucking Ottoman Empire, aren't you? Think about it. An invasion into Europe. And that's what Russia did. They invaded fucking Europe. And it made the relevance of NATO suddenly spike. Suddenly NATO was important again. The fact that Obama had said, you should be spending 2% of GDP on defense. And all the other parties, the members of NATO, which were 30 members at the time, I think, and then it's become 32 now. But they were like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that one day. We'll get there. But it wasn't that important, I don't think, because everyone's like, well, we're kind of getting on at the moment. Do we really need to spend all this money on defense when who's going to attack Europe? But this is the point where Europe had to rearm rhetorically and materially. Well, that has been a bit uneven across the continent, but the dependency on the US has become so fucking obvious, like never before. Logistics, intelligence, big ticket capabilities, like the US still underpins so much of it. And then you've got the political clock. Everyone knows the US support depends on who is the president at the time. And Europe cannot gamble its security on a coin toss every 4 fucking years. And Ukraine is the point where Europe realised dependence is not just embarrassing, it's fucking dangerous to our fundamental, right to fucking exist. Diz, thank you very much to Martin Harrow for the £2 super chat. Diz, latest cap ad. Oh, look, no one gives a shit. Thanks. Thanks for that. We've got Trump now back in charge in America. To Trump 2.0. He's only been in charge for a year. It's only been a year. Jesus Christ, it feels like so much longer. And his behavioural shift is he's openly treating allies as subordinates. The vibe is no longer, just a wink and a handshake anymore. He's saying it with his full chest. He's saying it out loud. Pay up, align, or else. He's saying your sovereignty is conditional on, how he feels from one day to the next. You got the territorial bullying, whatever the legal mechanics, the mere willingness to strong arm a NATO country into giving up its territory, it being Greenland, is just fucking, it crosses a psychological line, to put it mildly. And it tells Europe we might use leverage against you, not for you. And these values, the value war, they're trying to export to Europe. The US has framed, or the US leadership has framed Europe as decadent and misguided, being concerned about the civilizational threat that is fucking climate change. Right? That's a bad thing. What you should be concerned about is migration. Sorry, what? Migration is a civilizational threat. Okay, explain this to me. How many Americans are migrants? Pretty much all of them, apart from the Native Americans, which comprise less than 1% of the population of America. Okay, cool. So 99% of you, migrants, right? Somewhere else, right? Is that correct? Yes. Okay, so no American civilization then. Okay, cool. I'm happy with that, I mean, they nicked most of their civilization. Most of the things that we think of as American. Hamburger, where's that from? Hamburg. French fries, where are they from? Oh, cool. They're called French fries, aren't they? Oh my god. Woohoo! Coca-Cola. Does Coca grow in America? Does it? Fuck, it grows in Colombia and it grows in Bolivia. It doesn't grow in America. It's imported. They have to import all of their coca leaves that they use to extract to make the fucking Coca-Cola. True story. So yeah, the fact that they're trying to frame, the Americans are trying to frame climate policy as self-harm, and also being woke as something that is going to destroy our civilizations, which it will not. Being not woke will destroy our civilization because everyone will be at each other's throats. Being woke is just being fucking decent. That's all it is. It's being decent to other human beings and not making them feel like shit. And America, Europe's response has been, we're not joining your fucking culture war. Well, I mean, Orban said, oh, yes, sir, no, sir, feedback's full, sir. But the rest of us have said, we're not joining your fucking culture war, you mad bastards. And this isn't a policy dispute. It's a clash of civilizational self-image. Like, what makes us, what makes our civilization our civilization? Is it civilized? I don't know. And then we've got this nightmare scenario in Ukraine that America's pushing for, a peace settlement shaped by US domestic needs rather than European security realities. Where Trump is talking about getting the natural resources, he's getting the rare earths from Ukraine. You're like, what the fuck? This isn't about a mining operation. This is about an existential threat to a major part of Europe, of our continent, and beyond. Because if Russia is successful in Ukraine, have taken half of fucking Ukraine all the way up to the Dnipro River in the middle, then what's going to stop them? What's going to stop them taking eastern Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania? What's to stop them blasting a corridor through from Belarus, which is under the kosh of Russia? It's a vassal state of Russia, from Belarus to the little exclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea. What's going to stop them doing that? What's stopping them going to take Transnistria off Moldova? Maybe they would take the whole of fucking Moldova and then start, pushing their way into bloody Romania. What is going to stop them? So, the fact that this sort of the peace settlement that they want to, that America wants in Ukraine, just doesn't deal with the realities of the fact that there's a guy in the Kremlin who very, very much wants to expand his empire because, Russia's only the biggest country in the world. It's not big enough. But then again, a lot of Russia is fucking badlands. Like, it's places where no one lives. Siberia, no one fucking lives in Siberia. You can't. There's no point. You can't grow anything. It's under permafrost most of the fucking time. Like, it's a shit place to live. It's an uncomfortable life. It's a life that people just do not want to have. And so no one fucking lives there. Although it's the biggest country, it's like Algeria is the biggest country in Africa. Great, well done. But most of it's fucking useless. Most of it's fucking desert. Algeria, the actual people who live in Algeria just all live on the fucking coast, and there's a couple of oases around dotted around. But you look at the map and you're like, wow, that's a big swathe of fucking land. Yeah, but most of it's badlands. Most of it's places where no human being can really live. There's no water. There's no way of growing anything in the fucking sand. And here we have, the pressure for concessions in the Ukraine conflict. They're landing on the victim, the country that's been invaded, not on the aggressor, not on Vladimir fucking Putin. And if Europe can't count on consistent US backing in Europe's largest war since 1945, then the alliance is fundamentally degraded. These small cracks that have been there probably since the invasion of Iraq have become absolute fucking, they're turned into chasms. And the US, like we had Marco Rubio at the Munich Security Conference yesterday saying we belong together. But then he paired it with, you got to change your policies, like trying to strong arm us in Europe of like what we put as priorities. Obviously, we're putting our citizens' rights first. We put working rights first. I hear in Argentina, they've got rid of all kinds of workers' rights. They're getting rid of the right to go on holiday. They're getting rid of the right to actually get paid in money. In Argentina, I'm not even kidding. And people are rioting on the streets, but that's the future that America wants from Europe for some reason. We don't want workers' rights. We don't want human rights. We want the UK to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights because we don't want human rights. We don't want human rights we want rights for billionaires because they've got enough money to pay for private rights that we're not allowed, the rest of us aren't allowed to have. But the US has proved time and time again it's not a stable ally. And Europe doesn't need America to love Europe. Europe needs America to be predictable. That's all it is. That's all it is, and it is not. So the current European mood is this the autonomy without appetite for pain. This idea that we could have large chunks of Europe not being under the cosh of the US is growing every single day. People see the US as a threat, at least a risk factor. But people like the idea of autonomy across Europe, but they dislike the cost. They dislike the higher defense spending, the higher energy costs, the trade friction, the industrial policy that means winners and losers. And, some European firms might lose out as a result because Europe, one of its biggest markets is the US of A. Reverend Kathy, thank you very much. Confetti on the collection plate for Diz, please. Thank you very much to Reverend Kathy there for the confetti, and I'm pleased to announce that we can 3, 2, 1, unleash the confetti! Cool and normal. Woo! Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, so thanks very much. The getting back to, I'm not pitching a fantasy here. I'm pitching what's probably going to have to happen anyway. We're probably going to have a transition. And Europe is at the stage where it knows that the marriage is toxic, but it's still pricing up the divorce. And no divorce ever takes place without someone losing something. And, when I say that we're done with America, it's not that we hate Americans. The cultural ties will remain. People remain, science, art, friendships, families, etc. And I'm not saying that we need to quit NATO tomorrow. The near-term reality is that NATO is still the umbrella. But, we're done with strategic dependence. We're done with the US as a default guarantor on anything that we want to do politically or militarily or economically. And we're done with it assuming that American leadership is always going to be benign. I think that there was always this idea that America would act at least in its own self-interest. But it hasn't. And, this isn't just America who's done this. I mean, we haven't either. In the UK, we became the first country in history to put economic sanctions on ourselves. Like, I can't think of anything more illogical and fucking stupid than to say to our rich, wealthy neighbors, we don't want to trade as much with you anymore. We want to put some friction between us. I'm gonna board up the fucking front door so you have to climb in through the back window, and if you want to buy things from my shop. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And this is when I pull rank, because I've been to every country in the world, and I know I mention this a lot, but it does inform my worldview in a way that very few other people on this planet can have their worldview informed. And one of the things I noticed was the amount of fucking poverty in the vast majority of countries around the world. The idea that we were going to say, fuck off to the 44 countries of Europe because, no, it's okay, we can trade with the 150 countries around the world who have all got so much money. About 10 of them. About 10 of them have got all the fucking money. The rest of them, they're not going to be buying on Nissan Qashqais anytime soon. But this is going off on one about Brexit. I'm just saying that America's not alone in being unpredictable and doing stupid stuff. But up to this point, I feel like the idea that cooler heads would prevail and America would act in its own self-interest. And its self-interest really, really is keeping Europe sweet in some way, But no, they're blowing it out the fucking water now. It's not gonna happen. And Europe, I'm sure, will continue to cooperate with the US when the interests align, but it will not structure its survival around US domestic politics. And the US, let's talk about what life will look like without the US. So defense and security, first of all, Europe has to build what up to this point it's rented. Deterrence, readiness, ammunition stockpiles, air defense, ISR, cyber, logistics. Now, one of the things that we could pick up on here, right? There's two big things happening at the moment. AI, right? Which I know I go on about AI being shit. But when it comes to its integration into modern warfare, not to say we should build fucking Cyberdyne systems, because I don't want to build Skynet and destroy humanity. But give you an example, right? So you have maps that have been, not maps, satellite imagery. And they're looking for particular things in the satellite imagery, where the enemy is, right? Humans doing that might take a long time. But one thing that AI is fairly good at is pattern recognition, whether it's finding cancers in pictures of people's lungs, or whether it is x-rays of people's lungs, or whether it's finding a munitions dump that's hidden under the ground or whatever in eastern Ukraine. So you've got applications there. And also, at the same time, drone warfare. Now, the numbers are absolutely staggering. I read the other day that Ukraine last year made over 1 million drones. 1 million drones. And they're all fucking low cost. They're all like 800 quid for a drone. A military drone. It's like, it's all in all, it's fuck all compared with how much it would be to build a bloody one battleship or one aircraft carrier or one F-16 fucking fighter. Do you know what I mean? Like, sorry, I forget the technical names wrong there. I'm not big up on me military hardware, but the point is, we are at a transition period in how our defense is run and what we need to defend ourselves against drone attacks, but also the fact that we can make drones fairly fucking cheaply. And one of the problems that we've always had with money being spent on defense, a lot of that money goes down the drain because, like most things, ammunition and hardware has a shelf life. There is a point where it just fucking stops working. And if you're not fighting an active war, you're going to have stockpiles, you're going to have warehouses full of stuff that you've built or made, spent billions of dollars, billions of pounds making this stuff, and it just all rots away. It just doesn't last forever. And then so yeah, we got that. We got I think this is really important though, because we are so enmeshed with America at the moment, especially when it comes to cyber, especially when it comes to the internet and how our everything works, from the NHS to our nuclear weapons. Everything's based on American software and sometimes American hardware as well, and that this is where we have to start looking in new directions. And I'd much rather rely on our European partners, because we are going to have to rely on someone. We don't have enough money, we don't have enough power to just go on our own fucking way. Like I say, as an island, we've not been able to fucking feed ourselves since the 1840s. Not the 1940s, the 1840s. And then we've got to work on things like procurement at the moment, for fragmented procurements, where we're buying one system, and America, Germany's buying another, and Spain's buying another, and France is buying another, it's ridiculous. We need to work on this together. One of the reasons why there isn't a European-wide rail network is because up till fairly recently, the Iberian Peninsula, had Spanish gauge, right? But now they've got standard gauge, right? So let's get this straight. Pretty much every country in Europe, in the EU at least, has the same fucking gauge on the trains. Maybe some countries in Eastern Europe, because they had like a weird Russian gauge, didn't they? They had a slightly different one. But you would think that the trains could just trundle along any railway, from France going into Belgium, and then into the Netherlands, and then into Germany, and then up to Denmark, and across to Sweden. And you'd think that would all be quite fucking easy, but it's not. Not because the railways, the lines have a different width gap between them. No, it's not that. It's the fucking signalling. They all have their own signalling setup, and they're all different. And some trains work with certain signalling operations, and some work with others. So just trying to getting all the signalling uniform would be a great step forward. I mean, that's not talking about military logistics, but talking about transportation logistics. Working together, stop this fragmentation. Stop doing your own thing. Work together, and that's one thing that the EU's always been pretty good at, is having one unified system for whatever it is. They're bringing this in for the European ESTA, or the Electronic Travel Authorization, ETA. But when you think about the fact that they have forced Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, to put USB-C, to use USB-C cables with their phones, and Apple's gone, all right, because they had to. I mean, they complained about it, but they had to in the end. Europe's pretty good at that. So working on that same sort of concept of just making a procurement for things across the board, but especially for defense, makes so much more sense. Because don't forget, America, one of the reasons why America's done so well over the years is because of its size, is because of its population, but also because of its standardization, in a way that it has 3 power grids. It's got the Western power grid, the Eastern power grid, and the Texas power grid for some reason. But generally speaking, across the board, if one state needs more energy, that it can be passed on from another state. If one state's got too much, it can be moved across, right? We're trying to do that in Europe with the interconnectors. We've got interconnectors now going under the channel, which is great. But more of that, please. More integration. That's what I want, because it makes more sense to have a system where we're all working together on this stuff. And you'll see that all the Trumpers and all the fucking, the refuckers and the Brexiters, they all want to move away from that. They want us to be different from everywhere else, because that's our identity. And it's not our identity. No one's ever going to take it away from us. They're really not. And the people coming here from all over the world, yeah, it's because we had a fucking empire. That's part of our identity too. It's part of our shared history. But yeah, the having autonomy, having power to do our own things, make our own decisions of what we want to spend our money on and the places we want to go. This is really, really important for us, because autonomy implies standardization, joint purchasing. And there will have to be some politically painful choices to be made, especially when it comes to industry. But the US guarantee of our security is shaky, then we've got to do it, and it might be a good thing. It might be a good thing. Why haven't we got our own? Why haven't we got our own things set up? Why are we so reliant on America at this point? It just seems mad to me when we've got perfectly reasonable partners across the EU who are kept in line by the fact that that none of them is capable really of bullying all the others. Some people think that Germany runs the EU. All right, mate. Who was it who held up the EU Canadian trade deal a few years ago? It wasn't the Germans. It wasn't Angela Merkel. It was the fucking the farmers of Walloon. It was the Wallunatics who said, no, we're not going to do this. And when the Irish had a referendum on the Treaty of Lisbon, they had a referendum on it, and they rejected it and said, no, this is no good. And so they changed the fucking treaty to keep Ireland sweet. Ireland had another referendum, and they said yes. Now, you see how Nigel Farage frames that, because he goes, oh, you just keep having referendums so you get the result you want. No, they changed the deal. It wasn't like, here's the deal. Do you want this? No. Here's the exact same deal. Do you want this? Okay, yes. That's not what happened. They changed the fucking deal. But yeah, if the US guarantee is shaky, then Europe clearly has to confront deterrence credibly. And this is politically radioactive, but it's unavoidable. It's unavoidable, especially with Ukraine in the situation it's in now, the eastern frontier. Europe as the primary patron now of Ukraine, now that America has all but pulled out of supplying anything under Trump because he doesn't care. And security. Well, actually, he may well be a puppet of Putin. Who's to say? But security isn't some. It's not some theoretical thing anymore. Oh, what if this thing happens? Well, we need to have some defense. No, it's happening. It's happening now. And the US, when we talk about trade and economic power, the US as a market is one thing, but the US as a coercive lever is fucking wrong with the tariffs, sanctions, extraterritorial pressure. Fuck off. Europe's response toolkit, we need to reduce single point dependencies, and we need to build our internal markets, our capital markets and industrial capability. Europe needs to change. Europe does need to change in the face of all this. One of the things that the EU really needs to get a grip on is investing in its fucking people instead of just regulating them. Regulation's great up to a point, but there is a point where we need some investment in people and ideas. We need investment in military strategy, in industrial strategy, in economic strategy. We need that investment coming in. And the hard truth is that autonomy may slow growth in the short term, like European autonomy. And it may mean higher costs and fewer cheap inputs, but in the long term, it'll be worth it because Europe as the EU should have a bigger GDP than the US because it's got more people. Europe's got about 500 million people, whereas America's got 330 or 340 million. We're like a third bigger than them. And we should be making more of that. We really should be making more of it. And then also we've got the fact that logistics around around Europe could be easier. Like I said, the aforementioned trains, like people go, why isn't there a night train that you can why can't you just get on a train, St. Pancras, and wake up in Warsaw? Just can't do it. Can't do it at the moment. They're trying to give them the due. But also, Europe needs to be able to move faster. It moves so fucking glacial speed. And one of the things that Europe can do, but one of the things the EU can do, that I think it really should do, is get rid of the consensus rule. Because it just means that gobshites like Viktor Orban in Hungary can gum up the works for everybody else in Europe, which I think is not unfair. I never voted for him. Although I'm not part of the European Union anymore. I was taken out of it by some fucking Nepo babies. Because they wanted money and power. Yeah. Anyway, also let's talk about tech sovereignty. Information space, the platforms, cloud, chips, AI infrastructure. Europe realizes, it consumes tech built elsewhere under rules set elsewhere. And Europe, like I say, it's been good at setting rules. Been good at setting, getting the same the products that we have in Europe, I mean, they're safe. That's great. I think that's wonderful that these products are safe. And if I eat something that's got a CE stamp on it, I'm probably not going to die. But it now needs capacity. That needs to be ramped up. And that whole thing of like building up the tech. Don't forget, the only machine that can make the machines that make the super high, amazing GPUs that are needed to fuel the cryptocurrency and AI revolution, if you want to call it that, is in the Netherlands. So how about the Netherlands makes one of those fucking machines for Europe? How about that? And then we can start making those chips in the same way that Taiwan makes the chips at the moment. Taiwan have just major investment bribe into America to make a chip, a place to make chips in America, owned by the big Taiwanese chip giants. Oh, and by the way, when we're talking about chips as well, you do know that the Google Gemini, that they've got what is it called? Is it DPU? Is it a data processing unit? So the latest version of Google doesn't use NVIDIA chips. Yeah, Google AI, sorry, Gemini. Yeah, the latest version of Gemini doesn't use NVIDIA chips. It uses its own. So yeah, I think this is why. If I had to put money on it, I think Google's going to win the AI war. But yeah, and then we've got the fact that our payment systems at the moment, Visa and MasterCard, all go through America. The core payments rails and financial intermediaries are all foreign controlled. They're all controlled by America. That makes sovereignty a little bit theoretical for Europe when you can't control your own money and payments. So I'm a British person. I go to France. I use my card to buy a croissant and a cup of coffee, and it goes that payment goes to America and comes back. Why? And this is why European leaders are talking now about making a payment system, a Europe-wide payment system, which can replace Visa or MasterCard, which are both American companies, and also digital euro, which would be interesting if they do that. But an interoperational European payment network would reduce our exposure to external political pressure. So sovereignty isn't about flags. It's not about speeches. It's about fucking boring infrastructure. But we need to build it. And we need to build it now. And the question the idea that Gavin Newsom put out, which is what triggered me. I'm triggered. Talking about this today is saying, no, it's all right. We'll go back to normal in 3 years. And I don't think we will. Once you've seen a partner threaten abandonment or coercion, you can't unsee it. Someone, doesn't even have to be doesn't have to be your partner, it doesn't have to be your husband or wife or your significant other. It could just be anyone in your life. And when people start throwing their weight around and saying you can't be friends with this particular person, you can't hang out with this person in our interpersonal relationships, it's time to just fucking walk away, isn't it? But like on a global scale, it's a bit like that, where America's telling Europe who they're allowed to hang out with. It's like, what? Why are you telling them this? What the fuck has this got to do with you? So yeah, I once in any relationship, you've seen that level of coercion, the threatening of abandonment, the threatening of a fucking invasion. I mean, fucking hell. Think about the analog of that within a relationship. That's fucking dark. That is red flags all over the place. That is the point where you've got to just, cut your losses, get the fuck out of there. Stuff be damned. Sorry, I shook the camera there when I saw the camera. Sorry, shaking the camera. But yeah, and here's the thing, Europe will behave like it's been burnt because it fucking has. It has. It's learned its lesson, I think, now. Trump won. Okay, fair enough. It's just for a few years and things might go back to normal. But Trump 2 came along. They voted for him again. And you know what? When Trump is gone, they might vote for someone even more fucking Trumpy. I remember when George W. Bush was the worst thing that ever fucking happened ever. Wow. Ms. Paula Thomas, GPU, graphics processing unit. It was originally designed to perform the complex calculations required for moving images on screen and became faster to keep up with screen resolutions. Yeah. But didn't they find that GPUs were kind of useful when it came to running lots of little programs all at once? If you go to any big temple, there was a Brit building or designing something, e.g. batteries were a British invention put on Apollo, says Sean. Gavin pissed me off. It's not enough to short Trump. He's still cozying up to billionaires. I am heartbroken, says Liz Allen. That's the only way he'll win. I'm sorry to be really blunt about this, but okay, you can be the person that you want him to be, but that person won't win an election. He just won't. What was my thing? Go back and watch the videos last year or the year before now, Jesus Christ, where I was saying there's a good chance that Trump will win. I was getting shouted down by everyone else in the chat. Like it was on Friday Night Social. Everyone was like, shut up, Graham. And I'm like, no, it's because that's what the billionaires want. And we live in a world where the billionaires get what the billionaires want. J.K. Rowling is a fucking billionaire. She wanted to make life fucking hell for trans people. And she did. So yeah, he has to. I'm sorry, but this is real politic in the world in the world that we live in, and we can't be purists about it. We just can't. It's why it's like people going, "Oh, Labour are just as bad as Reform." I know some people in the chat. I know you're watching this, and you're getting about to just do all fucking caps at me and say, "Yes, they are the fuckers because they did this, they did that." Yeah, but the thing is, the distance between Labour and Reform is this, right? Labour are doing a few things that you like. A few things. Not as many things. They're not saying it in the right way, not selling it in the right way, and Keir Starmer's not that great as a fucking Prime Minister, whatever, right? But they're doing a few things, right? That are okay, right? So, renters' rights, the Hillsborough Act, which is coming through, the workers' rights that are come through, the fact they've put up minimum wage, the fact that they're spending more on the NHS, the fact that they're fixing these school buildings, the fact that they've got a whole pothole fucking like task force or something to give money to councils to fix the fucking potholes. There's a few things. There's a few. I mean, I'm sure if Phil Morehouse was here, he could list them all, but I can't. Right, whatever. There's a few things. Not only are Reform not going to do anything that you want them to do, anything at all, they are going to actively work to kill you and your family and everyone you love and everything you love about this country, or everything you don't despise about this country. That's the difference. And I don't want to come across like, oh, just a Labour apologist. But I'll tell you this, no political party is ever going to live up to your expectations. It's like reading the best book ever and then watching the movie and go, well, that doesn't live up to my imagination. You're like, yeah. And the reality is, right, the real politic, hate to use that word again, but this is the world we live in. There was never a Labour Party in power that was mad left-wing. That was going, hey, let's bring in universal basic income. Yeah, let's give rights to everyone. Let's do this. You had the Attlee government, 1945 to 51. Yes, they brought in the NHS. Yes, they brought in basically the New Deal for Britain, right? They also oversaw the secret development of the nuclear bomb, and they also oversaw the partition of India, in which over 1 million people were slaughtered. A lot of them with blunt weapons. It was really fucking grim. It was really fucking grim. And who was in charge at the time? It was the Labour government. So if you're going to pretend that there was some wonderful time, under Wilson or something, when everything was absolutely, ding dong crazy awesome. With all due respect, I think you're living in fantasy land. And I'm sorry that Labour have been really fucking shit, especially to our trans community. That really upsets me. And they could just be doing so much better. And again, why are they doing this? Why are you doing this to us? Well, because we're told what to do by the fucking billionaires. What should we do next, JK? Oh, well, I think now you need to go after single mothers. Trying to write a book about a boy wizard. Okay, let's go after them. This is a very specific group of people to go after there, JK, but or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, going back to normal in 3 years. Look, it's not going to happen. Trumpism is going to outlive Trump. The movement, the incentives, the media ecosystem, the polarization remain. Jeff Bezos is still going to own the Washington fucking Post and run it as his own private fucking newspaper bullshit factory, just like Charles Foster Kane in the movie Citizen Kane. He's got to continue to pay for Trump's wife to have this big singing career, and even though she can't fucking sing, just like in Citizen Kane. In fact, I think a lot of the things that we were warned about in the movie Citizen Kane, which was about William Randolph Hearst, by the way, I think that's yeah. Anyway, so the US as even if the next president is a polite gentleman, the system is still capable of electing another Trump. And if that's what the billionaires want, is what the billionaires will fucking get. And we need to move away from that. We really do need to move away from that. And the US has shifted strategic focus anyway. Under normal presidents, the US attention has been increasingly pulled towards the Pacific, China, domestic fracture, border politics, the industrial competition. Europe is I don't think it ever was a particular priority, but it's certainly not now, you know. And the new attitude towards Europe in America will stick. And once Europe starts building autonomous capacity, there'll be no point in dismantling that. Well, we've started down the road already because of Trump. Institutions built for independence will create political constituencies that will defend them by their very nature. Why would we want to give up our European Twitter? Why would we want to give up our European Facebook? Why would we want to give up our European banking system, bank transfer system? And then you've got the fact that the sort of the values divergence is widening, you know, across climate, migration, regulation, human rights framework, speech law. The gap is not just esoteric. I mean, this gap is structural between Europe and America, and it's just fucking going to grow. No matter what happens, if Trump drops dead tomorrow, the potential for future disputes with America are baked in. I mean, it's just the way it is. The best case scenario isn't back to normal. It's managed cooperation between two powers, Europe and America, with very, very different trajectories. And this idea that Europe can't defend itself is incredibly frustrating, because Europe isn't weak. It's just under-organized. We need to work on the organization. You know, the money exists, the industry exists, the talent exists. Oh my God. The problem is coordination and political will. There should be a Europe-wide thing now where we're poaching the brightest and best from America. Get them to come over. Get them a fucking castle if you need to. Just get them over here. Get them working for us instead of working for fucking NASA or the NSA or whatever. Just get them working for us. You know, stop working for the fucking Pentagon under that fucking, you know, coked up fucking drug head. What's his name? Drink head. The alcoholic Keg's breath. You know, do you want to work under Keg's breath, or do you want to work under us? Would be very nice and give you a flower of your fucking garden for coming over. Everyone gets a castle. You get a castle. You get a castle. You get a. And this isn't just, you know, Trump being Trump. This isn't about his personality. It's about the fact that this can happen again, and it has happened again. Trump was re-elected, and Europe cannot gamble its survival on the luck of the draw in America from one election to the other. And if Trump does to the election system in America what I think he's going to do going up to these midterms, I think that the Republican majority is just locked in now. It's just absolutely logged in. And this isn't like NATO's fine, you know. Nothing will happen. It's like, first of all, something has happened. Russia, which NATO was created to defend Europe against, has invaded Europe. I can't make it any more fucking straightforward than that. And it's not like NATO can be beaten by Russia. It cannot. It absolutely cannot. But what's happening is it's eroding from within, just like America, to be honest with you. And the idea that we're too divided, obviously Europe has always been divided. It's always had its own ways of doing things that need to be respected. But the way around that isn't by throwing it all away and saying, well, we need to be dependent on America forever because we just can't make a decision. It's just making sure that those decisions don't need to be consensus based. You don't need every single member of the European Union agreeing to something for it to go through. You don't have to make it half, by the way. It doesn't have to be 52-48 for everything. You can make it a supermajority, right? But just do it. Just fucking do it. Don't give people castles. It turns them into turf, says Gallifreyan man. Okay, fair enough. Ms. Paula Thomas, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. Trumpism also predates Trump. Look at the history of voter suppression in Florida and Tammany Hall in New York. Yeah, it's all happened before and it'll all happen again. We need to be able to overcome internal vetoes within Europe, Europe as a whole, but also in the EU. And then this idea that the autonomy will hurt the economy. Yeah, it will. It fucking will. Dependence costs money, Sorry, it depends. Sovereignty costs money. Of course it does. But here's the question, right? Do you want to pay now or pay later? Because paying down the line is going to cost us a lot more. It is going to cost us a lot more. So yeah, we need to have European, not hatred, not isolation, not just adulthood. I guess we need to pull away from America, and Trump is making this so easy for us right now, and we need to capture this opportunity in defense, in tech, in payments, in trade. Europe's mistake was confusing American power for permanent American commitment. And alliances, look, they're based on trust. Trust is based on predictability, and predictability, as far as we're concerned, is gone. And we're not necessarily breaking up with America. We're not, going to bring fucking trade embargoes. We're going to ban American films or American food from Europe. But, we need to get rid of this dependence because it's too dangerous for us. And even if Trump leaves, the lesson remains. The US can flip again. And Europe cannot afford to be a passenger in the fucking domestic drama that is going on in the US. This is Europe's independence moment. It's going to be messy. It's going to be expensive, but it's long overdue. And as far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely unavoidable. I'm sorry, Marco Rubio. You can say what you like about America and the UK being friends. But the reality is, we'll be better off without you. We'll be better off without you. And although that's a difficult decision to make, it is the decision that I think that a lot of Europeans will come to. Because you're going to stand up a year after your vice president has stood up and literally said, Europe is failing. Europe is shit. We hate Europe. You want to be more like Russia. And then the Valentine's Day message from Rubio yesterday was change or get dumped. What was it? Change or get dumped. And then, like some abusive partner who, what goes from love bombing to telling people to fuck off, whatever. He said that your US and Europe belong together despite the tensions. No, we don't. Europe belongs together. And I think that going forward, we can cut out quite a nice little niche in the world, working together. The 27 countries of Europe, plus the new ones that are coming on, and I'm sure Britain will fucking... the EU, so 27 countries of the EU. I'm sure Britain will fucking rejoin in some way over the next few years because it's in our economic interest to do so. And the more that we work together with our European partners, and that will give us the position, the sovereignty that a lot of people in this country really, really desire. But when we were told that our sovereignty was being stolen by Brussels, that wasn't true. That wasn't true at all. Because here's the thing. We never had to ask Brussels permission to fire off a nuclear weapon. We have to ask the Americans. So who's really in control? Who's really in control? You want sovereignty? It's time to put your big boy pants on. Team up with our friends across Europe. And tell America to fucking do one. Uncle Sam. Bye. Anyway, so yeah, soon some Americans are gorgeous human beings. Will never abandon them, says Sean. Yeah, I'm not talking about abandoning America as like the country. I mean, like I say, I'm sure there'll still be trade. I'm sure there'll still be things, but they shouldn't be able to have as much control over Europe as they do. They shouldn't be able to dictate our foreign policy. They shouldn't be able to dictate our domestic policy. Rubio was spouting Trump, but dressed in the odd bitter linguistic to hide the malignancy. Yeah. Keep saying this. Being in Epstein's file is not acceptable. Mandy and Andy pay the price. Starmer gets flack. Yet it's okay to associate with Trump. Mr. Million mentions. Yeah. In the famous words of Farage, this is our Independence Day. Well, it could be Benny Larson. Maurice Glasman was advocated for leaving the ECHR on the Times Radio this week. Yeah, Maurice Glasman is a fucking pain in the arse. We should get the fuck out of Labour. He is not helping. He's doing the absolute opposite, actually. Sovereignty also keeps the profits and tax in Europe, so the cost is meh, says Urban Legends. Yeah, you're right. Why are we paying? Why are we paying for this stuff we can do ourselves? I don't understand. You know, we could do so much better. But yeah, we can't rely on the US any longer. We have to stand on our own legs as a continent. Together we can be strong. Yeah, absolutely. We've got a bigger population than America. We've got more infrastructure. We've got more high-speed rail. America's got no high-speed rail. I mean, they're trying to build a line from LA to San Fran, and that's been taking them about fucking 40 years, hasn't it? So yeah, we can do it. We can do it. We just need we need just to have a positive attitude, I think. So there you go. Anyway, that's my little essay for the morning, my little video essay. Hope you enjoyed that. Did you see Rupert Lowe started his own party? Oh yeah, the Restore Trust Party, or whatever it's fucking called. Restore Britain. Restore Britain, it's called. Rupert Lowe for the Tories weren't Tory enough for him, so he joined Refuck, and then the Refucks weren't Refucky enough for him. So he's got his own party now, fucking lunatics. He's being funded by Elon fucking Musk. You know, foreigner interfering in our politics. And yeah, these people who go on about sovereignty all the time, they're happy. They're happy for Nigel Farage and Richard Tice to be paid for by Dubai. I'm at the Daily Show. It should be called the Trump Files, featuring Epstein. Trump's name comes up in it a lot. Apparently, we've only got about 2% of all the data, you know. Because Epstein filmed everything. He had secret spy cameras all over his island. So he's like filmed all these rich, powerful billionaires having sex with minors and then possibly eating them. We don't know. I mean, some of the depraved shit that's come out of those messages, the Epstein files, it's just like pretty fucking mind blowing. It's pretty fucking mind blowing. But yeah, Americans don't care. Don't seem to anyway. No one's going to go to jail. Nobody's going to jail. So yeah, the European-based payment system is underway. We just need to accelerate. Yeah. So I guess Musk is officially done with Farage. Excellent. Yeah, they don't like each other because reasons. Well, it's the same way like Farage doesn't like Tommy Robinson, but Elon Musk likes Tommy Robinson, but Tommy Robinson likes the Matt Goodwin, who's running for Gorton and fucking Denton in Manchester. Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay, so there's lots to do. There's lots to do. So much for the end of history, eh? Anyway, look, have a great day. I'm going to go off, and I think I might take the girls out for bubble tea and coffee. Not everyone likes bubble tea. I like bubble tea. We might get one bubble tea and 2 coffees. We'll go and see. So we're off to do that. And in the meantime, I'll just say thank you so much for watching. And I will be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the morning with Morning Brew. I might do a show tonight, actually, depending on how things go. But if I do a show, I'll tell you what you can do, right? If you want to be awesome and clever, is if you hit the subscribe button. Where's my subscribe button? Oh, I've got a different setup. All right, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification icon, and that'll tell you when we're getting ready to go. We're getting ready to go. So thanks very much to everyone in the chat. Thanks to everyone who dropped the super chat in. Thank you very much to Diz for marshalling the troops to throw some money into the collection plate, Sunday collection plate, so we could fire off the confetti cannon. And give us a like on the way out. give the like a lick on the way out. And until next time, just before I go, I just want to say a big thank you to Mike Dix for holding the fort on Friday for the Friday night social with Scott and Hannah, and they put together a really, really good show, and they did really, really well. So I'm chuffed. I'm chuffed about that. I'm chuffed. So yeah, until next time, thank you for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.